Welcome, welcome. This is the first successful gardener program of 2024. We do these every first Thursday of the month, January through June and August through November. And on the back table, there's a handout. I think it's the plant sale one. If you flip it over, it has the schedule for the successful gardeners on the back. I wanted to put it out there because our plant sale is coming up March the 2nd, which is tree seedling and fruit sale. So we'll have native trees and shrubs. We'll have all kinds of fruit: blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, apple, pear, figs, all of that kind of stuff. And we will not be in this building this year. It's going to be a change. We are going to be in the Simpson Event Center, kind of on past the building. So there'll be signage, and you can go onto the Master Gardener website to get more information. Right now, they're buying plants, so we don't have a list of what will be for sale. What else do I need to tell you? Anyway, our topic tonight is successful strategies for vegetable gardens. And you are really in for a treat. I've known this lady for 15 years.
2005.
Yeah, something like that. She was one of my star Master Gardener volunteers when I was in Northern Virginia in Loudoun County. She was the vegetable garden leader in their teaching garden or demonstration garden, as they called it. So this is Denise Palmer. So she's going to share her extensive knowledge and experience. She's been a Master Gardener for over 15 years. I've already told you she led the demonstration garden for their team. She loves to teach. So you're really gonna pick up a lot from her tonight. Her years of teaching and community lectures include all areas and seasons of vegetable gardening. She's also taught, and she still teaches for the Master Gardeners in Loudoun County for their trainees, organic and sustainable gardening. And I've seen her speak and teach at other places too, so it's really in her blood to teach. So she and her husband retired. They tried out Florida. They didn't like that, so they came back to North Carolina. So she only lives, what, about an hour from here?
Right, it's Hope Moore County line.
Yeah, so she's now a Hope County Master Gardener. So I'm gonna flip this on Denise and turn it over to her and let her go.
All right, so I'm gonna first welcome you to January. And just by a show of hands, how many people consider themselves to be fairly new to the vegetable gardening world? Well, we got a few, but it looks like we also have a number of experienced gardeners. I want to welcome you because what January 1st brings for me, as I like to call myself the Vegemite, I live and breathe vegetables. Originally, I'm from Iowa. I was raised on a farm. I was mostly responsible for the family vegetable gardening. Did not like doing it when I was growing up at all, because it was a big phase. Fast forward a number of years, life got away from all the vegetables, went to the big city, did big city things, and then later on down the road found that I really missed the land and growing things and being part of nature. So that's when I came on board the Master Gardeners in Loudoun County in Virginia, and discovered that my true passion was vegetables. When you live in an urban area or suburban area, as we did, nobody knew how to grow their own vegetables, but they wanted to know, and they just needed somebody to teach them. So that's what I concentrated up in Northern Virginia. Since moving here to North Carolina and being in the country and having a little land now to garden myself, I find myself living on a sand pit in the sandhills. And that comes with its own special, unique circumstances. Let me tell you, I used to curse clay soil, curse it, didn't like it. Clay soil, I want the fields of Iowa, again, where your topsoil is 32 inches, but I would take clay soil back in a heartbeat. So I'm assuming that most of you have some sort of clay here, because you're not living in sandhills on a sand pit. So tonight, we're gonna go through just a few of the basic topics. And then we'll kind of expand upon those as we move, our way through. So when you're talking about vegetable gardening, a lot of it involves how much do I think I can do? I am getting older, I'm no spring chicken, and I find myself being able to do less and less each year. So when I'm planning out my vegetable gardens now, it's not the same vegetable garden I would have planned out 20 years ago. And when you're considering, well, what should I grow in my vegetable garden? It's good to take a look at the best economic value. What are those things in the grocery store which are expensive? And I mean, you can buy potatoes pretty cheaply in a grocery store. But the best economic value, science has told us in homegrown vegetables are those vegetables that you see there. Also herbs. Herbs are expensive in the grocery store. And if you're a cook, I also like to cook, you know that you can burn through a bunch of herbs pretty quickly and also burn through a bunch of money doing it. So I always, when I'm in vegetable gardening territory, don't forget the herbs, because herbs are expensive and they can be grown especially quite easily here, where you have the heat, not so much the humidity, but the heat. Vegetables which need space are inexpensive to buy. The onions, the Irish potatoes, if you have the space, go for it. In sand, it's hard to grow potatoes. So that's kind of off my bucket list there, where I live. Vegetables which are better homegrown, but special care requirements may mean smaller yields. Cauliflower. Anybody here grow cauliflower pretty successfully? Yeah, it's a pretty hard road. Even broccoli here, I think, can be a pretty hard road because of the pests, because of the diseases, and because of the heat. And then when we're planning out a vegetable garden, we really want to say, how much time do I really have to dedicate to this? And so you're going to choose, you know, in your list, you're going to choose vegetables which are expensive, more expensive to grow, but then you're going to sort of hone down on those too and say, well, realistically, how much time do I really have to spend on my vegetables? And I grow most of my herbs in pots or containers near my back patio, just because even in this sunlight we have here in July and August, sometimes they need to be put underneath the shade because they're going to burn up. So where can I grow vegetables? If you're contemplating for the first time where you want to grow your vegetables, you know, most people think if you've got some land, well, it's all going to be in-ground gardening, but that's not necessarily so. Again, if time or space is a concern, you might want to consider containers. In Northern Virginia, in a suburban environment, we grew most of our stuff in containers. It was just easier to grow them, especially when we didn't have land. Raised beds, ornamental beds, edible landscaping. Anybody here do edible landscaping successfully? I have attempted edible landscaping more times than you will ever know, because the books tell me I should be able to do it. But I find that it is a hard road to go down. It's just, the conditions never seem to be right when you have like a perennial or a shrub next to a vegetable. Things just don't seem to work out very well. But perhaps you can be successful at it and you don't have another space. You could try in your perennial beds or your shrub beds, making a space to maybe grow something pretty, like kale or some of those other greens, which are pretty. It's got to have shade though, don't forget that. Community garden spaces. I am also a community garden planner. If you have your own acreages, you know, we don't really need community gardens. And down where I live, they don't have community gardens. That's not something they have in there. But community garden, if you live in an area, maybe you live in a development, you have smaller yards, A lot of times, the HOAs nowadays are putting in community garden spaces where you just have a little plot to take care of. Or in your area, in town, you might have a community garden space. Of course, in-ground gardening, the old standby, or if you have a plot of land. The various methods of vegetable gardening, and I point these out again because, you know, gardening doesn't have to be on this large in-ground, you know, we need tractors to take care of this stuff. You can go with a kitchen or potager. Those were popular, especially in Virginia. Again, small space gardening. You didn't have to devote a lot of time to it. You could put herbs, you could have hardscape in it. And I actually loved those little type gardens, and they were often part of all the old plantations and homesteads and, you know, Mount Vernon and all of those. I embraced all that stuff. Row gardening, which is your traditional, row 'em in rows, for larger spaces. Intensive, vertical, and square foot. So when I went to Virginia, I figured out, oh boy, they took away all my topsoil. I was in a development. They raised all my topsoil. I was left with I don't know, what, gray clay and rock. I'm like, how am I gonna grow vegetables here? And so that's when I found the Master Gardeners, and they said, you should use square foot gardening. I'm like, well, what is that? You know, I'm used to the rows. And so they showed me. And it's just I started out with a 4x8 box, raised bed. It's about 6 inches tall. And I used the square foot method. And it's how I learned to garden in such a small space without proper topsoil in my suburban backyard. And at our demonstration garden, the square foot garden was actually one of our most popular demonstrations. Because the mothers would bring the children, and it's a very good system to teach grandchildren or children how to begin gardening. It's a very simple system. Intensive and vertical, don't have land, you go up. I have done that a lot. Intensive, you are maximizing your crop production, you're putting crops together, you're growing them at the same time. They may have different harvest dates, but you're growing them at the same time because you're trying to maximize your production out of this plot of land that you have. Succession, one crop goes in, like this year, you know, I'll put my, I still try spring peas down here. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I don't. Actually, it's too early where I live. It is a little. But I'll put my peas in. Yeah, usually around the end of February. If I can get frost protection of them, I'll try a little bit earlier. But I just like them, you know. And then once they're finished, which will be fairly quickly, because the heat will burn them up. Usually sometime in May. And then something else, squash or zucchini, will take the place of those peas. So that would be considered succession planting, where we're taking our spring crop, we're moving it into summer, and then from summer I actually move into my fall crops as well. So again, those are methods to maximize production, because I'm always about maximizing production. That's what keeps me so busy during the summertime.
Keep in mind, she grew up on a farm in Idaho.
Iowa.
Sorry, Iowa. And they operate on bushels per acre, so that is coming.
And I had to convince my dad. I didn't let him down by just becoming a vegetable gardener. He's a row crop farmer, you know, we can't stop big. So I had to do something in the gardening realm, and so I said, look what I did. Look how many bushels I can get out of this stuff. So when we're talking about making a vegetable garden, where should I put a vegetable garden? Well, you might say, look at your property. You might say, well, that would be the perfect place for a vegetable garden. And that's what I did. When I looked at my property, it's new construction. It was on a former hayfield. Looked at my property and I said, back corner Well, that area would be perfect for my vegetable garden. Guess what? It's the leach field for my septic system, so that's not going to work. We had to move it someplace else, but you do want it as much as possible to be close to the house. So I couldn't move it, I couldn't put it on the right side. And so, I had some other issues get in the way, and they're called a husband, because he wanted stuff here. And so I'm like, well, where's my vegetable garden's gonna go? And he's like, well, way out there, looks like a really great area. So after much consideration and much going back and forth, my vegetable garden is actually not close to the house. It's about 150 feet from my house. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're hauling water out there in July and August, you are struggling. So as much as possible, we do want to get it close to the house, so that, yes, when you have to water it, it's not such an arduous task. When you can see when stuff is hard, when you need to pick something, because, we've got insects here. Did anybody know that we have insects here in North Carolina? Nobody's ever experienced the insects, right? And, there's an insect that I have discovered in North Carolina and never had problems with it in Virginia, ever. It's the leaf-footed plant bug. That thing will destroy tomatoes and the bulbs. So, if I need to go do something, I need to take it, go do something. The garden should be close to the house so that you can monitor it for harvest. If you've got squirrels, you know that the squirrel is also looking at your ripe tomato, and they're waiting for the perfect day of ripeness. And then you're gonna go out there the next morning, it's gonna be ready tomorrow. And guess what? It's got little tooth marks in it, because the squirrel beat you to it. So again, you're looking at your garden, you wanna be able to monitor it as much as possible. Direct sun exposure. So, I noticed, since moving here, that the sun is very intense here. And, so in Northern Virginia, I would have to belabor this point. You must have 8 hours, for fruity vegetables. If you want to grow tomatoes, if you want to grow, squash, if you want to grow, you've got to have minimally 8 hours in order to do that. Now, my stuff is out in the sunshine like 24 hours, and it's begging for shade cloth, which I do have to put on it, in July and August. But, when we're looking at houses in Southern Pines and all the big pine trees and stuff, and one of the things I would look for is how much sunshine was gonna be on this ground, because I needed to have a garden. And, oftentimes I did not find the 8 hours I needed, to grow vegetables, to grow my summer vegetables. Now 6 hours for your leafy greens, onions, carrots, cucumbers. Cucumbers do pretty well. And they'll produce pretty well in shadier situation. Because in the hot sun, if you've ever noticed your cucumbers wilting, they're just asking for a little relief. Just give me some relief, please. And so, so in my house now, they get a little shade cloth when it comes to the end of July and August. Normally in more northern or Midwestern garden, I'd say your orientation of your garden bed is best at north and south. But here in North Carolina, you've got a sunny spot, it really doesn't matter. They're gonna get all the sun they need. Observe and monitor your area for sun exposure. Right now, you might have an area that has all kinds of sun exposure, and you're like, yeah, my garden will go right there. What about that deciduous tree that dropped all its leaves? So what about in June, when it's got its leaves? What kind of shade is it going to throw over your area? What about the orientation of the sun? Because right now it's low on the horizon, but in the middle of summertime, what structures are going to actually shade that particular location? So orientation of your garden beds, if you're putting in new ones, it really have to take a look at all of what's going on. And now's a good time to start judging that. Because a lot of people think, oh yeah, of course I've got 8 hours for but once those leaves start coming on the trees and that sun orientation moves up a little bit, you might be surprised to find that you really don't have that. I would also point out that although these garden beds in this diagram here are up against that wall, don't do that because it's not going to get any airflow. Those garden beds are really appear to be oriented too close to a wall, which is going, especially here with our heat and humidity, which is going to block a lot of your airflow around your garden, because you do need some airflow around that in order to mitigate disease issues, especially during July and August. So I would move it off a little bit of walls or other structures. And then our soil. Our soil, we always want to maintain a pH, or try to maintain a pH of 6 to 6.5 for vegetables. How many people have taken soil tests of their beds and they know exactly what they have? Good, because you really should know. Now, I took soil tests of all my beds. The agent that we had when I first came here said, "Don't worry about it. It's acidic." I said, "Okay. It's all acidic around here. Yeah, you know, it is a hayfield. Don't worry about it. It's just acidic." So I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "But what is acidic?" And he said, "Oh, it's always just generally below 5. And I'm like, "Okay." So anyway, you know, time, I got lots to do, lots to get set up here, new place. So I threw some stuff down on there. Well, the next season, I went and I took proper soil tests, like I should have done in the first place. And lo and behold, I don't know what they did to that hayfield, but my pH was at 7.8.
They put lime on it every year.
That's what I thought. And I talked to the agent then, he's in Kentucky now, by the way. And I said, what is this all about? And he said, "Well, that's not supposed to be a good idea." So a little lesson for me, I should have just gone ahead and done what I know I should have done, which was to take a soil test. I mean, that's why we're master gardeners and you tell everybody to take soil tests. But I just maybe want to take a little time, a little effort, a little energy. You know, my agent said, "It's all acidic." So know what your pH is. And of course, your extension office, and your master gardener volunteers in this county can show you how, give you the soil test and explain to you how to take a soil test. Soil test every 2 to 3 years. It could go in clay. What do you say?
That's usually what we tell people.
Because in the sand, they're telling us sometimes, in some indications, it should be every year. Just because sand leaches so readily
And Denise, I'll point out, people don't realize when you do a soil test, you can follow those fertilizer recommendations for 2 or 3 years until you test again. But you only put down lime once. And don't put any more down until you test again. And that's what happens is people put down that lime every year.
Every year.
And they get that pH too high.
Okay. Well, I'll have to let those Moore County master gardeners know up there. And make sure that if you're siting a vegetable garden, that you don't try not to site it next to large trees. Especially black walnuts, because black walnuts produces a chemical. And most vegetables are actually allelopathic to it. They won't grow well. But, you know, large trees just in general, think about what their root structure is doing. The root structure, no one's going to get in the way of you if you're going in ground. If you're on a raised bed, it's going to grow up through your raised bed, these roots. And it's going to take all your nutrition and your water away from your vegetables. So when you're siting a vegetable garden, make sure that you're at least 60 feet away from these trees, or about 60 feet away from your garden beds. I had a maple tree in my old house. Raised beds, maple, I was probably 40 foot away. Last year I was there. Here come the roots, right up through this stupid maple. You know, we're planting maples up there. You won't get me either maple, ever again. That maple destroyed our yard. Good soil drainage is necessary. So plants don't like wet feet. In general, very few plants like wet feet, as we like to call it, or waterlogged soil. So with your soil, if you're doing an in-ground garden and you have options, you want to make sure that you're placing it in an area where you don't constantly notice puddles. It's a low spot, rainwater collects. The good thing about sands is that very rarely happens. So you're pretty good on the sands. If you're on a slope, water's gonna run quickly down that slope, you're gonna have runoff, and it's gonna erode all of your surface soil. So you also wanna be careful about slopes. Consider raised beds if soil drainage is an issue. Sands, they told me flat out, don't even try to go in ground if you're on sands. It's just not even worth the effort. So I built these raised beds on the sand, on top of the sand. And we filled it with a mix from the local landscape company. And in order to defeat the Bermuda grass, we used black plastic down and then put landscape fabric down. And I have not had any Bermuda grass growing up in those raised beds. Everybody thought, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I gotta kill this stuff.
Deep enough for roots?
Yeah, so in a raised bed, when we're talking raised bed, we want 6 to 8 inches. And this is actually an 8 inch, because they are going down into the sand somewhat for the deeper roots. But understand that most of your vegetables are in the top 3 to 4 inches of the soil. You know, things like tomatoes, which can establish longer tap roots, sometimes peppers, and some other things, they may go down further, but generally, most vegetables are going to be happy in the top 3 to 4 inches. Now, if you're going to grow gigantic, like I grow heirloom tomatoes in these, so I knew that I needed at least 12 inches, but I only made it 8 inches because it can go down into the sand. There's something underneath it. I haven't blocked it from doing it.
Oh, so you didn't put the plastic?
No, I just put the plastic around the beds to kill the Bermuda.
Oh, I thought it was in the beds, I'm so sorry.
No. But everybody told me that Bermuda is gonna grow up in those beds. It has not yet. That may be a problem in the future. Right now, I've kept it at bay. If you're new, take your expectations and cut them in half. Because you're gonna get your little heart broken. You're gonna overdo it. You're gonna say, I wanna do this, I wanna do that, I wanna do this. And things are gonna get out of control, and then you're gonna think, oh, everything has failed, or mostly everything's failed, and then you're never gonna garden again. And then what good did that do? Why? Because you're just one of those vegetable gardeners that walked away. And we want you to be successful. We want you to be successful. And it's better to be successful in a few things than it is to be over everything. You know, we don't have to grow all of the vegetables underneath the sun. We can start small. We can expand. You know, you can expand by, you know, growing one in-ground, just putting one in-ground bed in. That's a 4 by 25 foot, which is larger than anything that I had at my last place. And so there's plenty of space if you're a new gardener with just one of those beds. Source of water nearby? Please, oh yes. We're gonna need water for those vegetable gardens. For those of you more inclined, you can run drip irrigation, you can run timers, you can run all kinds of things to get these garden beds watered. The problem we run into in Hope County, you know, I know Hope County, you know, I don't know if you know about Hope County, but you know, they're just starting to get it together there as far as infrastructure. And so we don't have enough water pressure coming to our house to run drip irrigation.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's kind of, they're supposed to be bringing it online, but I'm like, oh, you just put in 1,000 houses. So, you know, and hopefully, you know, sometimes if you're running off of a pump, if you're running off your own well water, sometimes you may have that issue as well. Because, some of the gardeners that I know down there who have wells on their farms, they say, you know, water pressure and trying to run drip irrigation on timers and things like that. They may not have that kind of water pressure at times, especially during the summertime when the water table is dropping. Wildlife. Don't get your little heart broken when the little critter comes and eats all of your stuff. So we all love furry bunnies. We all love cute little squirrels. We all, well, I don't know, some of us, I don't know about the deer. Anybody think they're cute? I mean, they're.
Somebody else is doing
It's, furry bunnies, oh, yeah, they're so nice, oh, yeah, they're furry little bunnies, but eat everything I have. And so, this last season, that bunny, boy, it got the best of me. I put, hardwire cloth around this bed. I was growing, lettuce, had some my peas, and had some other things in there, and that bunny. It got my husband came out one day and he said, what in the world is going on? And I said, that bunny's not coming in here again. So understand that even if you don't think you have critters now, you will probably get critters. And more than one person has had their little heart broken. Denise, you won't believe what happened. Let me guess. Something got it. So plan for that. And that's part of the planning right now, is to say, you know, I have a 6-foot fence around me so the deer don't jump it. But that doesn't keep out the bunnies. It doesn't keep out all those other critters, snakes.
Raccoons.
Doesn't keep out all that stuff. It'll keep out the deer. And we have got about a herd of like 20 of them across in the longleaf pine forest, which is across, which is good, but everything else gets in there. So I still need to protect these beds by putting hardwire cloth around for the bunnies. And sometimes the squirrels, I don't know if they get hungry or something and decide they want to munch something. And I have to figure out how I do that. And I do it different ways, just depends on my mood. Sometimes I just use row cover to throw it over. Sometimes I try bird netting, but bird netting gets nasty and it gets mixed up with everything. So just whatever happens to phase me at the moment is what I'll go for. I can't shoot them because our houses are too close. So
You could get a dog.
we have a dog, but she's all 9 pounds, and she thinks they're her friends. So we have discussed getting a bigger dog, but that's a discussion for my husband and I to have. Where he will want another dog. He doesn't want another dog. I do. So you know, and you can go online. There's plenty of ways to sort of mitigate these circumstances, but none of them are going to be 100% foolproof. And so you're going to have to use different methods in order to do it. So when you're planning, you have to, number one thing to do is list out what you want to grow. And if you get your family together, especially if you have children, small children, they like to be part of the planning process, you know, they're going to throw out some pretty wild ideas. And you're going to probably try to do it. And then you're going to realize, oh, it's a little bit above my pay grade here. So how about we just grow some radishes? I used to work with school gardens in Northern Virginia. I tell you what, you want to get a child interested in vegetables, you plant some radishes in a raised bed or plot of land, you let them plant those radishes. And then in 30 days, you let them harvest them and eat them. You didn't think your kid would eat a radish, but if it's something they have grown, something they put into the ground, something they have nurtured, they will eat it. And they will be very appreciative of how food is grown and what fresh food tastes like. So do take, do take their suggestions, but also understand, some of the suggestions may be bigger than what you have time and effort to do. Design out your garden space, draw out your garden, draw them out, and write in where you're gonna grow this stuff. Where is this stuff? You've got this whole laundry list of things. I've got tomato, my spring vegetables, I've got lettuce and arugula and peas and all this other stuff I wanna grow. And then I've got my summer vegetables grow, so I write in where everything is going, when something's gonna come out and when something's gonna go in. And use the planting calendar for Central North Carolina that's on the extension website.
For those in the room, I have hard copies of the back.
There you go. So I tell you what, you guys are lucky because you've got this Extension Gardener Handbook free online. And yes, each of us have our own particular area and we'll learn more about that. You'll learn more about your particular area, but I tell you what, it is one of the best resources I've ever gone through as far as gardening. I was in disbelief. My husband bought it for me. I think within 2 months of me arriving here, my husband, and I'm like, where did you get that? That's like, you can't just get a hold of this. Do you know somebody? And he said, you can order it on Amazon. I'm like, seriously? And but anyway, it's a very good resource, and I advise you to take advantage of that resource because it has a lot of valuable, timely, and good information. Sometimes you go to these websites, you Google something pops up, and you're like going, okay. But if you don't know any better, you may think it's that's the way we're going to do this. But understand it, it's just clickbait. And may not necessarily be what you need to hear for your particular area in your particular circumstances. But do search for the planting calendar. When your spacings, your taller vegetables could be shading your greener things. So your garden orientation, and like my tomatoes often will shade my Swiss chard. So my Swiss chard is going to be in the bed over here. My tomatoes are going to be in the middle. During the summertime, my tomatoes, when they grow tall enough, excuse me, will actually start shading my Swiss chard during the summertime. Because the Swiss chard during the summertime, it's a leafy green. It's going to get bitter, it's going to get raggedy, the bugs are coming. I'll just cut that stuff down. But if they have some shade from my tomatoes, they'll actually do pretty good. Till about August, and then I cut it down anyway and just let it regrow back in September. Use an online garden planner. Lord knows there's plenty of those online. They want you to pay for most of them now, so but they could be worth your time. It could save you, especially if you're inexperienced at planting in your zone. And don't plan to plant your garden all at once. We're going out there on May, everything's going in, we're gonna shove it all in that ground. Don't do that. So we're gonna, in our next slide, we'll talk the difference between spring and summer. But we're not planting our garden all at one time. It's a disaster waiting to happen simply because it's overwhelming to try. Because you've got to, plant your seeds, plant your transplants, you got to put in our trellises, we're just going over here, and then suddenly, bam, it's done, and okay, great, it's going to grow. Maybe, but you got to take care of it all at once too. And it's probably going to get crowded. You're going to plant it, it's going to get too crowded. So spring vegetables here in Central North Carolina, generally. For my particular area, it's late February to March, while summer vegetables are planted late April through May. But Debbie would be able to better tell you if that's a general or what you're planting here.
It works. It just depends year to year. It might be early February, Some winters, we don't really have a winter, and it, by the end of January, first part of February, it warms up pretty good.
Yeah,
The spring, so like the peas you talked about,
right,
early February.
yeah. Oh, no, well, they'll get their little pants frosted off in my garden now. So it's not, and some of it's about knowing what happens, how cold it gets, in your own backyard or how warm it gets. Now conversely, during the summertime, my backyard is Death Valley. Cause we don't have any trees in the backyard, there's a hayfield behind us, all the forests are far away, but in the summertime, my little plow lands like Death Valley. And I was like, oh, I think we're gonna die back here. And, but when the frost and during the winter time, there seems to be like a cold sink, and it gets very frosty back there, and it will freeze before my front yard freezes. And I'm not sure if it's the whole sand thing going on again. But that's what happened, and that by observing your own backyards, you'll be better able to know. And don't forget to include, so fall vegetables are planted in August and September. I go spring, summer, and fall. And in the fall, I don't know, these amber, so this year I tried a new brand of turnips. They were called Amber Globe. I got them from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. And, I planted some kohlrabi, I planted some turnips, I planted some lettuce, and I put it in, I think all of it went in about the 1st of September because it was so hot. My soil was so hot. And these Amber Globe turnips, kid you not, they took over. They were as big as volleyballs. And they took over everything. They took over my regular purple top turnips. They took out the kohlrabi. They just crowded everything out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the monster vegetable. I want my other stuff too. So they're still growing out there because I'm gonna see how big they get. I'm not gonna eat them because they're gonna be too woody to eat. But I wanna know how big these babies are gonna get. I'll send you a picture there. But seriously, these things are huge. I never heard, I never seen a turnip do that. It embraced what I had in that soil. And don't forget to include companion plants. So companion plants are different things to different people. And some people say, oh, if you put this next to this, it will grow better. If you put this next to this, you'll catch a pest or and some of that is, a lot of it's just anecdotal. Some of it's true. It's folklore or wisdom or knowledge passed from your grandparents or your great grandparents down to your parents and then to you. And it might actually be true. It might be something that actually did work. The problem is that scientifically, a lot of this is pretty impossible to prove. But I like companion plantings to break up my spaces so that I don't just have monoculture going on in my garden. One crop, that's what it is, come and get it. Instead, I'm breaking it up. And, companion plants are pretty. They draw in the pollinators, they draw in beneficial insects, they draw in the birds. Well, you don't want the birds on your tomatoes, though. And so you could use, like sunflowers around your garden, not necessarily in the garden, around your garden. I use French marigolds for a variety of uses. They can, one variety of the French marigolds, especially because nematodes can be such an issue here in the soil, I grow them just to see if I can keep the nematodes out. Again, it's just something I try, see if it's going to work. But I also like marigolds because, again, they bring in your pollinators, they bring in your beneficial insects. Tithonia. Tithonia brings in birds, butterflies, fritillaries, and those are all things that you want to be a part of your vegetable garden. Now, one thing I have learned is I like to keep it as a border around my garden and maybe down the central pathway, if I can do that. And at the ends of the beds, I have sort of learned some things about, putting some of these companion plants directly next to these vegetables. Because yes, the companion plants may bring in a bad bug, may trap a bad bug, which is called a trap crop, which is part of vegetable growing. But that bad bug is gonna be like, hey, I'm finished with this, let's jump over here and get the vegetable. So I'm a little bit careful about how I place them, placing them at the end of the bed, placing them around the beds, in a border, farmscaping. This is sort of for the vegetable gardener. If you look up farmscaping, it's sort of a downgraded version of what I'm doing. It strips around my vegetable garden, drawing these things in order to mitigate some of the insects and also bring in the pollinators. I don't have any problems with pollinators, thank goodness. So crop rotation, one thing that we want to say when we're planning out our vegetable garden, when it comes to vegetables, we want to be very cognizant of crop rotation. Vegetables have families too, just like we have families, right? So you might have, you might think all tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, they're all considered in one family. So they're considered in the nightshade family. So mustards, you have cauliflowers, broccolis, Chinese cabbage, mustard greens, watercress. So they're in another family. Then we have things like legumes, which are beans and cowpeas and garbanzo beans and all kinds of beans. They're in the legume family. So vegetables have different families. And when we're planting in our vegetable garden and planning in our vegetable garden on a yearly basis, what we want to try to do is to rotate these families. So I have three raised bed vegetable gardens, and each one gets a family of vegetables for that season. And then next year, they're rotated out of there, and I put in another family of vegetables.
Is it possible to get a copy of that slide of the rotation?
You, get the Extension Master Gardener Handbook. This was actually taken from the Extension Master Gardener Handbook. Look under, it's gonna be under, vegetables. If you look through that. What's Debbie doing over here, man? Debbie, did we get,
There was a slide right before this, and if she recognized, we don't have copy. Numbers, page 7.
yeah, but she also did something, she locked up the computer, I think. Oh, it's not a touch screen.
That's all right.
All right, so anyway, that table that you saw beforehand, that is in the Extension Gardener Handbook, in the chapter vegetables, it's a table. Debbie, I think that screen is locked up.
Oh, I may have done that, trying to get that stuff out. Okay,
Okay.
here,
All right,
so she mentioned this book is available free online.
right,
So you don't have to buy a hard copy,
right.
but it's got great color plates in it.
It's got a lot of, I wish I had had this, when I first started vegetable gardening in Virginia. You wouldn't believe the information that's available in here, and you can look for it free, on the, NCSE Extension Gardener website. There's also a copy in the library. Is there?
Yes, I have 3 more in my office, so I've got 5 I can sell. It would be $50. All right. Now try.
All right.
Okay.
My apologies.
Yeah, and so just one last thing about crop rotation, what you're trying to prevent is, well, we keep talking about pests coming to your vegetables, coming to your vegetables. Well, if your vegetable is in the same place every year, guess what? They're like, hey, I know who this is at, let's just go over here already. So what you're trying to prevent is pathogens and disease from building up in that particular soil. You know, one time I was working on the help desk in Northern Virginia, and I had this lady call me. 15 years, I've been growing my tomatoes in the same place, never had a problem, always wonderful tomatoes. 15 years, she said, huh, wow. Have you ever taken soil tests? And I started, have you ever considered moving your tomatoes? Why would I do that? They always grow great right there. And I said, well, guess what? They didn't grow great right there. So let's talk about crop rotation and taking the soil test. So that's what you're trying to minimize by doing that. And in smaller spaces, it is most difficult to do that. And I understand that. But in larger situations, you can practice proper crop rotation. In some of these, you know, we can get into the years. Oh, how many years before you do this? I just like to keep it simple and like do once every 3 years. That's why I have 3 different beds. I grow my nightshades in one bed. I grow this family of vegetables in this one. I grow this one in this one. And that keeps it real simple so that I know how to rotate it for the next year. So let's talk vegetables. So for new gardeners, they may not necessarily understand that we have seasons of vegetables, although I've spoke about it several times. But here's kind of our list of the different, what we consider spring vegetables, what we consider summer vegetables. So, you know, spring peas, leaf lettuce, radishes, cabbages, broccoli, potatoes, and beets, those are all pretty much considered spring vegetables. So we'd be looking at planting these type of vegetables around March 1st or into February up here, if you guys are a little warmer. Summer vegetables are going to be around this April 15th planting date. So these are going to be considered summer vegetables. May 1st planting date. So I know that I can't put, in my backyard, I can't put tomatoes or peppers in before May 1st because we get frost. We will get frost, so I'm not putting them in until that frost is, I know, is past. And last May, in our area, it was cold and wet during May. So I planted them, and they still didn't do much because it was cold and wet. And so I kind of had to, you know, hold them, you know, like, okay, we're gonna get through this, it's North Carolina, right? Global warming, come on, let's go. And then our fall vegetables, if you're so inclined, you know, these are the kinds of things that you would grow in fall. They do best in fall. But that gives you an idea of what you should be thinking about as far as vegetables and when you should be thinking about planting them in your vegetable garden. Now, we've got the little initials here. So when an S is seed, because I notice this is down here, leaf lettuce would be seed. Cabbages and broccoli, they're going to go in as transplants, which means you're not going to plant them directly as seed into your garden because their season's not long. So they're going to have to go in as transplants. Well, you say, where do I get those transplants from? Well, you can grow them yourself, or we can get any nursery or big box store for coast to coast. And they will have them for you. I grow my own transplants. I have a rack, I grow my own transplants, only because, you know, for our plant sale up there in Northern Virginia, we're big. You know, I'm going to grow like 3,000 transplants. So I kind of know how to do that now. But, and transplants, if you're just doing a few plants, I mean, it's not that hard. If you're interested in it, I would encourage you. They have equipment available today that I could have only dreamed about 20 years ago when I wanted to grow my own transplants. You know, some of these seed companies have these little small grow lights, they have trays, they have racks. If you want to grow transplants, certainly you can in today's world because there's so much equipment available. And garlic, a lot of people ask about garlic. Garlic goes in as a bulb around October 15th. Some people say, I've had a couple gardeners say, well, I put it in the spring. Well, how did it do? Didn't do very well. Okay, well, let's try the fall. So if it does good for you in the spring here, great. But from what I hear, it's better put it in the fall. Last year I put mine in the fall. I had a huge close. It's my best garlic harvest ever. I'm so proud of myself.
And when did you harvest?
So I harvested in May. Yep. And because when the tops are 1/3 browned up, then you're gonna want to pull them out, cure them. Which it's not hard to cure them here because everything is burned alive. So you just bring them together, put them in that shed, and watch them cure. It's cured like in 2 days.
And they're so different, the flavor.
Oh,
than
it is.
anything you can get at the store.
It is, it's so better than anything you can get in the store, it's just, yeah. And I grew enough, so I didn't run out until December, and they stayed. They didn't start to sprout off because, again, they're burning alive in that shed. That's the only thing I can say that the sun is good for. You wanna burn it alive, bring it to my shed. So seed and plant selection. So when we're talking seeds, we're talking plants, well, what am I gonna put in my garden? Well, yeah, they have those racks at the home box, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. Yeah, they got those racks things, you go buy their seeds. That's true, you can, millions of people do it, they do it successfully. However, I just wanna point out that, when you're in the big box stores and they've got those racks, you don't know how they were stored. You don't know. I know at the home improvement store, the only home improvement store we have in our area, the big one, they stored their seeds outside. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So, outside, well, we're getting humidity, maybe we get some dampness, maybe they're in the sun. They stored the seeds outside. I was just in disbelief. I don't understand this. Don't buy those, don't buy those. So, and I've got them off those racks too, but just beware that if your seeds don't happen to do well in your garden and you got them off one of these racks, there may be a problem. And also, Fairy Moore's had that debacle last year too, where, seeds were mislabeled in the packages and you thought you were getting peppers, but you were really getting lettuce or carrots or something else. So, again, it goes to, if you want to be sure you're getting what you're getting, then I advise you to explore the online digital world. Because there are so many great seed companies. I like to keep it local, because I think that the seeds that were saved here in this area are going to be more attuned to my environment than a seed that's coming from, let's say, Oregon, but that just may be me. But there's so many seeds that you can buy online, different varieties, different selections, different colors, and they can be set up for what your particular thing. Let's say, oh, I have this problem with X, Y, and Z. I used to have a problem with cucumber beetles at my last house in Virginia. Cucumber beetles would decimate my cucumbers. So sad was I. And I couldn't seem to figure out how to keep them from doing it. So I got a seed. I think it was, don't quote me on this, but I think it was the Diva cucumber. And it was a cucumber seed, a cucumber plant that the cucumber beetles didn't like. So guess what? They weren't hanging all over it trying to molest it. They were moving on to something else. So, if you have a particular insect, disease, pest problem, it's the online world is a good way to explore, well, I have this issue, maybe there's something out there for me. I'm sure there is. So our types of seeds. So you go to the seeds and let's talk about open pollinated seeds. So open pollinated seeds, the original type of seed, It means you can grow the plant, you can save the seeds, and the seeds will come true, once you save the seeds for the next year. And you can continue those seeds on down the line, open pollinated. Now, all heirlooms are open pollinated seeds. So if you're an heirloom vegetable gardener, then all heirlooms are going to fall under the open pollinated variety, which means that you can save the seeds from the right fruit. Now, hybrids, they say, well, why would we want to deal with the hybrids then? So, hybrids are hybrids. They're not GMOs. A lot of people confuse that. So GMOs are not available for sale to the home gardener. GMOs are only available for sale to the big farmer, like my brother. He tells me over and over how great they are. So you don't have to worry about that as a home gardener because you can't find GMOs. And if you could, they'd be so expensive, you'd probably pass on it. Now, hybrids are different in that hybrids are crossbreeding plants of the same type. So if we have a hybrid tomato, we have crossbred that plant of two different tomatoes because they have characteristics that we like. Maybe they're more disease resistant. Maybe pests are attracted to them. Maybe they grow taller. Maybe they grow shorter. So, you know, like the tomatoes you find in your grocery store. Well, most of those, they're all hybrids, unless they say otherwise, because they're grown so that they can be resilient to storage and packaging and making it to your supermarket. So you can get hybrids, and I like hybrids. I always say, don't bet the bank when you got tomatoes and you love tomatoes on heirlooms, because heirlooms, they're gonna break your heart. They're gonna, you know, they're lovely tomatoes, lovely flavor, lovely everything, but, you know, they have a tendency to go down sooner because of pests or diseases. Hybrids, you can bet, you know, they're supposed to have better resistance, better tolerance for some of the conditions which they may face. So when you're looking at your seeds in your seed catalog or online, if you see on the seed packet where it says F1, you know that's a hybrid. It says F2, that's a hybrid. Otherwise, it should say it's open pollinated. So on a seed packet, I have a seed packet in the next slide. Seeds, they're usually good for more than a year. So the general rule for saving seeds, thank you. General rule is 3 to 5 years. Although some gardeners, they go the distance, 10, 12, 15 years, because they know how to keep them. I can usually keep them around 3 to 5 years, but you know, if I can only grow 6 tomato plants, and I want all 6 to grow, I'm probably going to stop using my seeds like at 3 years because I want them to grow. So I'll buy new seeds. So, you know, you have to think about that too, because, you know, if we want our things to grow, we need to do germination tests on them, especially if we know our seeds are getting, older. But they will keep for a long time. Now, some vegetables, again, go into the ground as seeds. Some go in as transplants. Transplants you must grow, you must start before they go in. If you're buying transplants, I have seen some really awful transplants in this area. I mean, you know, because they get set out outside, they burn up, they're not watered, and people are buying them. I told a lady last year, I'm like, stop, don't do that. I said, these things are awful. Go someplace else. Because, you know, if they're yellow, they're dragging, you know, and then as master gardeners, sometimes we think, oh, we can save it. please, you're bringing disease into your home, just let it go, just let it go. So when you're looking for transplants at the garden clubs, or the nurseries, or the home improvement stores, but you're looking for shorter ones, you're not looking for the tall ones, you're looking for short, compact, green plants. Plants that look healthy. And then if you're buying summer vegetables as transplants, don't set out in the garden until the frost is over. Cause frost will kill them, and then you'll be sad again, cause you gotta go pick some more stuff. And then seed packet. So generally, this is what you're gonna find on a seed packet. Although I'm gonna be quite honest, a lot of times they're putting this stuff online now, and you gotta go online to find out the information. And I will say that these seed companies, a lot of them have really excellent grower libraries. So if there's something that you want and you're not familiar with how to grow it, what its requirements or whatever, I would recommend seeing if the seed company has a grower library. Because some of these grower libraries are really pretty substantial and offer you a whole lot more information than you would find on a seed packet. But it generally, they will give you, you know, the basic information about when it should go in, planting depth, number of plants per seed packet. Like for carrots, it's like, you know, 33,000. And you're like, oh my gosh. And then you look at the seeds and you know that you're gonna plant all 33,000 in a 12-foot row. And you're gonna have to thin those things out because the seeds are so tiny. And then a sell by date. It is always on the packet to tell you, you know, when the seeds were put in this packet, so you know how old the seeds are. But it'll give you the basic information. Like some of them say, go to our growers library to look at more information. So lastly, we're going to talk about soil. So how many master gardeners have been made fun of because they call it soil and not dirt? Like, I can't tell you how many people have said, you better say soil. I made fun of me, and I'm like, you know what? You're just uneducated. But is it soil or is it dirt? So I point this out to them. So soil is alive. It has all those microorganisms in it. It's alive. You know, back in the early 1900s, they thought soil was totally dead, inert, had nothing to do with plants growing. But now we know quite the difference, don't we? Soil is everything to plant growth. So dirt is dead. Dirt is what gets on your garden pans or on your gloves. Soil is alive. It's teeming with life, and it's teeming with everything to grow our plants up strong and healthy. If you have a problem with your plant, start first with your soil and examine your soil and think about what your soil is. So garden soil, you see all these bags in the home improvement stores. Everybody's always asking, which one should I use? Which one should I use? What should you put in here? Garden soil is that. Raised beds, in ground, you know, make sure it's appropriate for vegetables though. Make sure it says for vegetable gardening. Because if it says not for vegetable gardening, there's some ingredients in there they don't want you growing your vegetables in. So do pay attention to that. Compost. Compost is organic material. Compost is what you put in your soil. However, you can't just grow vegetables in compost. You've got to have something more. You've got to have soil in that mix too. It can't just be compost. The landscape supply company that bought all my soil in, what are you doing? I'm putting in vegetable garden. Oh, what are you using? Well, I'm gonna use the compost. You know you need topsoil too, right? On it, got it. It's already there. You already bought it to me. Now I just gotta mix it. So make sure that if you're filling raised beds, that you're getting a mix of topsoil and compost, and not just compost in these raised beds. Because that is the next thing, is topsoil. So what is topsoil? Topsoil is probably mostly sand if you're buying it in bags. And if you're buying it in bags, it's probably not the best topsoil, or it was topsoil that was raised off of your ground and then sold back to you if you have a new house. But if you want a vegetable garden and you're building raised beds, if you want a 50-50 mix of topsoil and compost. Potting soil, do not put it into your garden beds. Potting soil is for plants. So do not put potting soil into garden, raised garden, in-ground garden. Potting soil is for pots. It is for containers. So look at what you're buying and know what you're using it for. And then organic matter. What's organic matter? Dead stuff. It's dead stuff that is decomposing. It also has living microbes in it. Why do we care about organic matter? Because your soil needs it. Your soil needs it in order to thrive. Your vegetables need it in order to grow well. Let me tell you, when they told me I was gonna have to put organic matter into my sand pit 3 times a year, I about had a fit. I'm like, you are wrong, you gotta be wrong, that can't be right. No. So I tested it. 2 times a year. Little heart got broken. Things did not grow well. Things did not grow up. So last year I got organic matter mixed into my soil 3 times, and things went way better for me. So if you've got sand and you're trying to grow something in it, understand the organic matter is just leaching through constantly. If you have clay, you're not gonna need to add organic matter as much, but you are going to need it, add it at least once yearly. So we've taken our vegetable garden, we had a vegetable garden in 2023, right? 2024 comes, let's say March, you're gonna plant spring vegetables. Oh, let's plant it, everything's ready. No, we want to get our organic matter mixed into our soil before we plant, because how are our vegetables actually going to start growing? Because there's no nutrition. It's all gone. It's all been taken out from the vegetable garden in 2023. So you want to get your organic matter mixed in.
For adding soil to a raised bed, then when should I do that? Now or in the spring?
If your soil is dry, which it probably isn't because you got all that rain, I'm about to get a whole bunch more. I would wait for it to dry out a little bit, but February is, or even in the end of January, once it dries out a little bit, and you can work with it a little bit. I know we got like 3 inches of rain the last time it rained, which is huge, because we needed the rain. Boy, we were dried up and burnt up down there. So starting a new in-ground vegetable garden, what is there now? Do you have sod there? Sod's easy to rip up. What about, is it an old homestead? Is there a house there? There's a lot of abandoned, ripped down houses where I live. Yeah, they're widening 211 down there. And so these houses, are abandoned, they're taking them down, but I'm thinking, oh, wow, there's a lot of abandoned houses around here. So if somebody comes in, let's say that the land is sold to them, they decide they're gonna renovate this house. So this is probably a 1940s house, and and if they're going to put a vegetable garden in that ground next to the house, you can start thinking about things like, well, what was there before? Is it, we got asbestos in there, do we have lead paint in there, stuff like that. So these are just things to keep in mind if you have an older homestead. That you might need to consider if you're going to put an in-ground vegetable garden in there. Trees, ornamentals, rocks, sand. Best option may be raised beds. And raised beds aren't really all that expensive, and you're gonna put a little money into it, but my raised beds will probably last 10 or 15 years. I use preserved lumber, and make sure it's now, you can't get a hold of CCA lumber anymore unless it's for marine grades. It used to be, they didn't want you to use preserved lumber, because, it had arsenic in it. Stay away from it. If you're an organic gardener, preserved lumber is not your deal, stay away from it. But if you're just a regular home gardener who wants to build some beds, the regular ACQ lumber, preserved lumber you can buy in the stores and home, the big box stores of the lumber is perfectly fine. The big stuff, if it says marine grade, stay away from it. Marine grade is gonna be, has some chemicals in it that you don't want in your vegetables, but the regular stuff you can buy to build fences and decks, is okay. Just make sure it's ACQ. They've got a number of other things. Railroad ties and telephone poles. All right, so, come to West Virginia. I'm hanging out, going down the road, and I'm noticing like all these railroad ties, telephone poles every place. I'm like, man, this is so weird. Why is this stuff just laying around here? And I'm listening to people, oh, we're gonna go take that, we're gonna build this, we're gonna take that, we're gonna go build this, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. You might wanna stay away from that kind of stuff, okay? It may be free, they may be giving it to you, but sometimes it's a gift you don't want. So when it comes to railroad ties and telephone poles in North Carolina, there seem to be a lot of them. They're willing to give you. Stay away from them because they got creosote in them. You don't want to grow vegetables in that kind of stuff. Lands. If it's perennial beds or shrub bed or something, it'd probably be fine. But you don't want any type of food or vegetable to touch that stuff because it's probably 50 years old and it's still there because it's got that stuff in it. And so we don't want it inside of us. So stay away from railroad ties and telephone poles, which seems to be a thing here where I live. Again, soil requires annual amendments of organic matter. Compost is most common. Once you get a little more green manures or cover crops, they can be used in different ways. I've used them a number of different ways, but that's kind of a subject that has its own 2-hour dissertation. Animal manures, if you're using animal manure, should be vegetarian eating animals. And if you're using fresh manure, it should only be incorporated in a vegetable garden in the fall. Otherwise, it's best left in a pile to compost on its own. And then once it's composted, then put it into your vegetable garden and it could be used pretty quickly. Again, know the pH of your soil. Soil test kits from all the Master Garden.
They're in
They
the back,
got
they're on the back table.
Adding amendments. So if your soil test comes back, it gives you, this is what you're gonna do, this is what you're gonna do. They should only be done in the fall, really, to have much effect. So you wanna add them in the fall. That's why I always do my soil test in the fall. So whatever recommendations come back, I can do it in the fall. So my soil is gonna be ready to go in the spring when I'm ready to plant. And then vegetables will always need some kind of fertilizer. Make sure when we're doing vegetables that we are buying fertilizer that's appropriate for vegetables again. We don't want to be buying fertilizer that says, do not use on vegetables. I've actually seen it. So there's some things in there that, again, you don't want in your vegetable garden. But you will need to supplement with additional fertilizer during the growing season. Make sure you're reading your label and consulting the handbook or consulting your master gardeners before doing it, or if you don't understand how to do it. And then just practical advice about soil. Don't walk on the soil. There's this funny little saying, master gardener, I'm in charge of the demonstration garden. And I think this little intern, flip-flops and shorts out there. She's in my bed and she's walking around. Hey, come here. We can have a talk right now. So don't walk on your soil. You're compacting it down. If you're planting in it, don't walk on it. Use boards, use stepping stones, use something around it, and that's why when you build beds, your beds shouldn't be any wider than 3 or 4 foot, because you wanna be able to reach across. To be able to weed, to harvest, and all that kind of stuff. Don't work the soil when it's wet. Low and no-till practices actually preserve the quality of your soil. Rototiller queens, we do not want to be. Rototillers cause lots of damage to our soil. They break up all the living organisms, they cause a hard pan. If you have to, you have to. Once or twice a year is fine. But if we're rototilling like every week for the weeds, we got a habit that we need to break. Because you're ruining the structure of your soil by doing that. Use an organic mulch so that your soil is never bare. You know, we mulch the heck out of our trees and our perennial beds, you know, they all get loads of all this wood mulch on it and stuff. And then we think, well, the poor vegetables are out here melting in the sun on bare soil. So we want to use an organic mulch on our vegetable beds because we want to give them a little help. It's hot. And so it will conserve moisture. It'll keep the heat down from frying your veggies. And it'll also keep your weeds down. So use an organic mulch, and a lot of people use straw, but there are plenty of other options too that you could use in a vegetable bed. All right, I think we raced right through that. So do we have any questions?
Denise, just a reminder, repeat questions so the people online can hear.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So if you're doing a container garden, so what size, how deep should the container be? Like, I'm thinking like maybe a goat litter top, it's not really deep, or do you need to go
It
deep?
depends what your, so the question is, how deep should your container be if you're growing what kind of vegetable?
Cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers.
So each of those could have differing sizes. But I would highly recommend that if you want to grow vegetables, that's gonna be the way you're gonna grow vegetables is in containers. That you invest in, you know, bigger containers. And it could be a goat watering would be at least 6 to 8 inches. Yeah, and make sure you got drainage, right? So, and I think the handbook in their container gardening, section actually has some of those measurements. But it's obviously gonna be a bigger, we're not talking some little plastic tub like that, right?
Right.
So we're big, we're long, and then also think about how you can water it, because you can put reservoirs in the bottom of those things. And they can, so that you can just fill those reservoirs up, so then it becomes a self-watering container. So, and those do exist, because I have a large container, it's waist high, it's 5 foot long, it's what I grow my peppers in. And I have bought, reservoirs online, and I just fill those up, the soil and the peppers are on top. So I don't have, because in a container, things go even faster than sand, if that's possible. But I can keep it going for a couple of days in the heat without needing to be constantly out there. And morning, noon, night, or these things are frying, because it's so hot.
Is there a good way to get rid of fire ants out of the earth vegetable garden?
Fire ants, I'm gonna leave you to this one right over here.
Sorry, the answer is no. The question was, is there a good way to get rid of fire ants in your garden? The answer is no easy way.
No easy way. I haven't found an easy way. I mean, I teach them constantly. And I've, it's just, I don't know.
There are some baits or some things, but you have to make sure that it says it can be used in a vegetable garden.
Right,
Cause what you might put on your lawn cannot be used in your vegetable garden.
right. And I have actually looked at a lot of these labels, the stuff that's available to us in the home improvement store. And it says not to be used with vegetables. As a matter of fact, I think everyone that I looked at said not to be used in a vegetable garden. So,
ఆర్డర్ కట్ చేసింది
Debbie Cruz
ఎప్పుడు
said, orange oil.
Orange oil, yes.
So, but I don't know how to use it. She just said orange oil, so I got the orange oil.
Have you looked at, she has a small farms website. Her last name is spelled Roos. So if you Google her, you should, she's Debbie, Debbie. She should pop up, and, then you can get her website. She may actually have something on her website about that.
Right. They've got that pollinator garden over there in Chatham County. And so that's how I met her, is up there, but fantastic lady, if you're into, pollinators and such. Might be worth your time to take a visit.
And you also mentioned that we're in mulch. What were options other than?
Well, I mean, straw, I wouldn't suggest, I don't like using wood chips. Simply because unless it's really shredded up really fine, it's gonna take away, the nitrogen in the top, 2 inches of your soil. So I don't necessarily like to say wood. I use a paper mulch, I use shredded paper, the thing with cardboard is you want rain to pass through it. And so if it's not shredded, or if it's not thin enough where, rain and moisture can pass through it, you're also not getting gases in the soil. I'm trying to think, I think something I even use pine needles just because they're readily available, and I can get them, I can easily move them if I need, but pine needles work. Paper mulch, pine needles, on my, zucchini and squash, I use, plastic silver mulch, actually. Love this stuff. Oh, man, that stuff rocks.
You can use deciduous leaves. So the leaves that fall from your trees, chop them up with a lawnmower.
Right, yeah,
Because they don't blow away as much.
yeah.
When do you recommend watering in the summertime?
Whatever, you have the energy. I mean, I recommend early morning.
Repeat the question for the online.
Okay, so, the question was, when do I recommend watering in the summertime vegetable garden? Listen, earlier is better, because you're just going to be standing there watering if you're not using drip irrigation or timers. And I have learned that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when it's 95 degrees, and that sun is burning you alive, and you just say, drop the hose and run. But morning time is the best. Remember, when we water our vegetables, we don't water the plants, we water the roots. That goes actually for any plant. We don't water the plants, we water the root. I don't know, even my neighbor from Wisconsin, she watering like this, and I'm like, no, what are you doing? Stop that, stop that. The tree doesn't need to be watered, the roots need to be watered. So water your roots.
Thank you. Denise?
Hi, this is Naresh. I joined from Zoom. I have a question.
She's asking, natural way to amend soil and improve soil for next season. I grow clover and ryegrass in the winter to help with the soil and to keep the weeds at bay.
All right, so the natural way to improve soil, it sounds like what she's doing is exactly what she should be doing, which is growing rye and clover. And then it's called cover crop, when it's put in the fall during the winter. And then in the springtime, it will become a green manure, at which time it'll be incorporated into the soil, to add organic matter. So that's the natural way to do it right there.
Have you ever used rain barrel water for watering vegetable garden?
Yeah, I have, but there's a lot of debate.
Repeat question.
Rain barrel water. So the only rain barrel water I can get right now is off of my asphalt roof. And, there's great debate in the organic world, whether or not this is a safe means in order to water vegetables. So, I think, well, I mean, after a little bit, certainly it's washed off. And, if I don't have the luxury and I need stuff watered, and we're just dead dry, I'm gonna use it. Because my stuff needs to live, before I get wrapped up into, what is it, weed?
Any other questions, Nancy?
No, one person asked, I think you answered it, she said, what are the uses of green manure or cover crops? I missed that, she missed.
All right, so what are the uses of cover crop or green manure? So a cover crop is put on your garden beds, is grown on your garden beds. I have some growing on my garden beds right now, so those beds you saw are not bare. I grow a cover crop because I don't want all of my hard work to be blown away in the winter winds. And so right now I'm growing a crimson clover, which has died off, oats, and there's something else that I've got going on there. And I actually don't know what it is. I was gonna go out there today and find out what it was. But I grow those as cover, and then come February, I'm going to incorporate those into my soil. Now, if they're too high, I'll use a weed whacker, I'll cut them down, I'll throw the green mass into my compost, and then I'll use my rototiller just to get the rest of the stuff incorporated in soil, because it does take a while for it to break down. You're gonna need some time more for it to break down, and also might regrow again, which, that can also be a hassle. So you have to know how to use them, and you need to stay on top of them if you're using them, but they are great ways to add, natural way to add matter to your soil without having to use animal manures, and bringing stuff in.
Debbie.
What is the best way to add compost? Like after?
Compost breaks down fairly quickly once it's added to your vegetable garden. So generally, I don't recommend putting compost on your garden until a couple weeks out before you're ready to plant. Because, you know, it's very, the nutritional value, it's relatively low. So you don't want all those to leach by putting it out 6 months, because it's just all gonna be leached away by the time you put your crops in. So generally, I add compost to my planting holes, when I plant, and then maybe a week or two, I'll incorporate it into my soil. Making sure that it's fully broken down then. And it's gotta be, this stuff is due. All right.
Debbie. This is Floyd. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
There is a gentleman whose name is Naresh that's been trying to get a question in for about 5 minutes now. Can you address his question?
Okay. Coffee grounds, best in your compost. Because they're high nitrogen and they're acidic. So if you repeatedly put them on your garden beds or your garden soil, eventually you start to have nutritional deficiencies because they are acidic and they have high nitrogen. Yeah, so best use in composting situation. And that's with most things, you know, eggshells, you know, we want to get the stuff composted, we want to get it broken down so that we have sort of a homogeneous mix. And that's why it's called composting.